There is only one review of the rings, only one that can bend the fan base to its will, and we do not share power. Welcome everyone to Review the Rings. This is LRM Online, GenreVerse Podcast Network's review of, guess what, The Rings of Power, or to give it its full title, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, which is possibly the most expensive show ever made. Probably is. And, you know, when something is, you know, you have to talk about it. Like, is that money well spent? Is it not money well spent? That's what we're going to look at today for you and give you guys our opinion on it. Please feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on wherever you get your podcasts from. We're on them all, so please, if you're listening on podcasts, feel free to do that as well. And we will be reviewing this every week of season 1. Hopefully, getting into season 2 as well. If it gets green, well, I think it's already been greenlit, but I think we'll probably go there as well, unless we absolutely hate it by the end for some reason. But yeah, so subscribe and you'll catch us every week when we give our thoughts on the latest episode. So let's start off with who we are. I am Cam Clark, and your co-host today is Kyle Malone. Hi, Kyle.
What's up, man? I'm about to mess with my mic. Sorry, guys. We have a third co-host who's drinking coffee right now. If you're watching on YouTube, I actually brought Manny Gomez in here. But he's stuck in an endless coffee loop. So hopefully he will be done with that cup next week. Hi, Manny. How are you doing?
Yeah, he's not very talkative, Manny. If you're on podcast, you won't know what we're talking about. If you're on YouTube, you may see an image of Manny drinking a coffee cup. He is supposed to be here. There is going to be fetus because we didn't want to kind of, then next week Manny just turns up. We haven't said anything, kind of thing. But if he doesn't turn up for the next 3 weeks, we may have to just change it, or else it'll become a running theme. I don't know. See how it goes. So
throw it to you, Manny.
We can't quite. I know Manny is definitely a big fan of Tolkien. We're going to talk a little bit about our backgrounds with this genre, with the Tolkien stories specifically, before we get into our thoughts. Then we're going to go into non-spoiler sort of thoughts, grading the episode. If you have not watched it yet and you don't want any spoilers at all, and then we're going to go into the weeds a little bit more about the specifics that we liked and didn't like, and talk a little bit about the story, and maybe towards the end as well we'll talk a little bit about how this compares to the actual written word of Tolkien, where as much as possible we can cover without getting into too much detail anyway as well. So that's the kind of plan for this. So I'll start off with, I'm quite a Tolkien fan, right? I think I first read The Hobbit, or we did it at school when I was about 10 years old. When I was 12, I picked up The Lord of the Rings, read that for the first time. Took me a while. It was pretty tough to get through at 12 years old. And then I picked it up again around 15 years old. And at that point, that extra couple of years difference was big for me. I kind of really fell in love with it far more at that point, and then I went out and read the Silmarillion, and from there things like Unfinished Tales, all that sort of stuff. And these days I'm one of those geeks that goes on to like Tolkien fans on Reddit and talks to people about the actual ins and outs of the books. There's certainly a lot of people on there that have more knowledge than me. I'll tell you that, absolutely. But I like to think I can at least keep up with the discussion with the super nerds. Kyle, what's your kind of background on Tolkien, the books, films, whatever?
Similar in school, middle school, actually. Miss Treywick, I believe, 6th grade, maybe we did Hobbit. I don't remember.
Because I'm a
for us, so
lady.
You're looking 10, 11, 12, depending on.
So about the same age, yeah.
Yeah,
it was Mrs. Whitcutt for me. She introduced me to the Hobbit. So what is it, Lord of the Rings for you, or was it?
Well, both. We had them both in middle school. It all kind of blends together because I was in a gifted program for my middle school years, and I had the same literature and then language arts teachers. There's 2 separate ones, Kernick and Treywick. And Miss Treywick was the big fantasy fan, big Tolkien fan, even through like a big class party, and where we did like a God, it was like a scavenger hunt, but all based off of like riddles and clues from Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So that's where I got my first introduction for real. But before then, going back to God, sometime in elementary school, the original cartoon movie for
Did you
Lord
watch
of the
that?
Rings.
Yeah. Before you'd read the books, and you
Before I even
up.
knew what the hell it was just this
I was
weird.
much later than that. I had read the books a few times before I ever come across that Ralph Bakshi cartoon, So
it was just this weird, fantasy Dungeons and Dragons looking cartoon that I had seen. It didn't dawn on me until much
you
later
didn't know what
it had been. But I like them. They're good. The Hobbit was an easier read. Of course, it's one book. For those that don't realize, the movies
it's
kind
90%
of a kid's
fluff. Tale in some ways. It was written for. I wouldn't say it's quite a kid's tale, but it was written for his children. That's where you have to come in for that viewpoint. Yeah. A little bit darker than what you would call the crap that calls itself that these days, but still. Accessible for a child to pick up and do like at school or something at that age. Lord of the Rings is a bit different tonally though, isn't it? You get that quite stark change.
And then of course the movies hitting there in the 2000s was a huge deal. I saw all of them in theaters, and it's been fun. I'm not the world's biggest fantasy guy, says the guy with 4 Final Fantasy tattoos. But
and you're now doing 2 fantasy podcasts.
Yeah, 2 fantasy
you're also
podcasts.
On the Dragon Reviewed, which we do for Wheel of Time, and I'm on them as well because I guess I am the big fantasy fan here. So,
but I don't give 2 shits about Game of Thrones stuff. Like, I'd rather
it doesn't do it for you.
If I want politics, I'll watch Battlestar Galactica instead. So if I need boobies, I've got a wife. There's the internet, and I don't have to deal with the story in the army when Game of Thrones was big especially during my last deployment in 2013. I don't know what season was out then, but in 2013 it was huge, and that's all the guys would talk about. Man, they got all these great sex scenes and there's blood and violence. I'm like, well, I got.
Yeah, but that's, that's the lowest common denominator.
The story wasn't,
for people.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, the story didn't even
a good
care.
Story
I didn't care for it
at all. I'm a big fan of the books and the shows as well. For at one point up to the end, I thought Game of Thrones was the best show ever made. So, So Lord of the Rings of Power. So we've kind of both got that background. I've watched all the movies as well. I would say I loved the Lord of the Rings movies far more than the Hobbit movies. I thought they were stretched out a story too much and added in too much of their own, if you like, and it just didn't work for me overall as a story. And I guess that was my trepidation coming into the Rings of Power, because we have a very small amount of sort of lore that we can deal with here. First of all, there's the rights issues. As far as we know, Amazon had the rights to the appendices of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits, which detail some of these events, but not the actual Silmarillion, which was the kind of posthumously published rest of Tolkien's mythology, put together by his son, Christopher Tolkien. The problem you always have with the likes of the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, all these other stories, is that Tolkien never finalised one specific thing. There's a lot of stories that stayed almost the same all the way through, so you can say they're very solid. But there was a lot that he made changes to as well, and some of them do play into this timeline that we're talking here. So there's not a guarantee we can say this must happen, that. But there are key events that must take place within this show. But there's a lot of stuff very much open to interpretation, and a lot needs to be added as well, because there was never any dialogue written. It was all done in terms of, in this year, so-and-so became king, and then this happened, and so-and-so did this, and then Sauron was doing this at the time, and, It's
like a lot of those early biblical books.
Yes, it's very, I think it was, that's kind of why I love it, because it was just this mythology and we didn't have a story. But this absolutely is fan fiction. I mean, this is maybe signed off by the Tolkien estate. They may have some rules that they need to follow, which hopefully will be a good thing and help the show overall. But it is really a piece of fan fiction. And I think when we review it, we're just saying, what did we see? What did we like? Rather than kind of thinking of it as a strict, pure adaptation, which I just don't think is possible given what they kind of had to work with here. So let's get into.
I was going to just say before we start that, you heard about the Swedish company. I think it was a Swedish company that purchased the rest of the rights to the Lord of the Rings and mentioned the idea of more media.
Yeah, it's tricky. Because they could say, right, this is an opportunity that we're just going to keep taking smaller bits of it. I mean, the currently in development animation, the War of the Rohirrim, kind of falls into that category because, again, it's like we know a little bit about Helm Hammerhand and all that sort of stuff, but that wasn't really the main thrust of Tolkien's mythology. It was just a little bit in the background. So to make then a whole movie out of that, you're kind of like, okay, can they do this? Will it work? But I guess we'll have to wait and see on that front. But it does worry me slightly that kind of in the same way when Disney bought Star Wars, that it was like, right, we're just going to milk this, for everything it's absolutely worth.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what they've done.
And this Swedish company, they don't need any approval from the Tolkien estate, right?
Nope.
They don't. Right?
The way I understand it is, I don't even know what the Tolkien estate still has. I really
they've never sold
it.
any of the rights to the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, anything like that, right? So that's never been sold to anyone. So no one can really touch that content. But because some of that content is included within the appendices of The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits, Tolkien himself sold those rights before his death.
Yeah.
So those are gone, and they're still
out there. It's Embracer Group. Yeah.
That's it.
Embracer Group. 8 properties, including Middle Earth Enterprises. So,
but what I hear, they're also trying to get money out of Amazon for this show as well, as if we've got rights to this and you've just made this show. But I don't know how that works because Amazon did pay an absolute fortune directly to the Tolkien estate for this. So
it says Embracer does not own Lord of the Rings. Controls licensing rights to the Lord of the Rings franchise. Does not own Lord of the Rings. Those are still managed by Tolkien estate. It does mean Embracer holds sway over materials adapted into different mediums such as film, television, board games, theme parks, and of course video games. So Anyways.
So if anyone decides to make a Lord of the Rings theme park, they would have to be involved, I guess. It's a very strange situation, but here we are. And, at the end of the day, that's something for some lawyers at Amazon to work out. That's not for us to kind of worry about. And if this Embracer does produce more things, we'll either call them as they are at the time and say they're absolute crap, or they're very, very good and worthwhile. So anyway, The Rings of Power, opening 2 episodes, Shadow of the Past and Adrift. Kel, we're going to go into non-spoiler at the moment, so just give me your thoughts, what your grade was. I'll jump in after you and say what I thought.
Well, for episode 1, good overall, strong start. When looking at the pacing, a little choppy in moments. You kind of feel like you're staying in some places too long, maybe moving too fast in others. Maybe even feeling like, wait, I got to go back and listen again because I feel like I may have missed something, but not like jarring, just enough to kind of notice. It was a little choppy. Then you get into the dialogue. The overwhelming majority of it, solid dialogue. And this is all technical stuff at first before I dig into like the story stuff. Set design is astounding. There are some shots in it. I can't really remember if it was first episode or second, but there's some elf sets where the physical sets I don't think go back far enough, so you can definitely tell where the digital assets start.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Whereas it's physical at the front and then they're filling in the rest, which I mean, you kind of
it happens.
Accept,
it happens all the time.
An entire city.
No, but if you go back and you look at The Force Awakens, they go back quite a distance with the on the Starkiller Base in the forest. They have quite a distance. Now they used a lot of depth in that duel, but and you didn't need that much depth here. But that depth of the physical forest means the digital assets blend in better. Here it was a little bit more shallow. Not that big of a deal, but and again, I noticed things that others don't because I'm just
especially when it comes to like CGI
guy.
and things like that. Yeah, it's one of the things that just kind of flips you. Yeah.
And then there were a few other moments where I was like, you guys could have done some more. But they used the environment. The snow troll was great. They used the darkness to really hide any imperfections that there were. That felt like a cinematic battle. Although it was kind of dumb for all the other elves to just stand there and let Galadriel handle it all by herself. I mean, one dude did let her launch off his sword, but that's intro fight.
But no, I know what you mean, because I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. I didn't quite get that either.
But her fight choreography was good. I enjoyed it. What else technically? Music, Bear McCreary, for the love of God, Star Wars, put that guy on a freaking project. I have been dying for Bear McCreary to do a Star Wars movie since Disney said, hey, or project, since Disney said they were going to be doing more Star Wars stuff, because his music's great, from Battlestar Galactica to Outlander. I don't really care for the series, but it's got good music to this. I mean, the dude's very, very talented. So I love that. Set production, costumes look good. I do agree with a comment that you had made online that there's definitely some difference, and I'm not sure if they just the technology. I wonder how much stuff is 3D printed or cast, maybe injection molding. I'm not sure, but it definitely does.
Just to kind of clarify what my point was, I wasn't saying the costuming's bad. Some people have said that. I don't agree, but I think if you are comparing it to, say, the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies, okay, one of the Oscars for the costuming, because the costuming was so perfect. It feels like the costuming in the movies feels like people have cosplayed and tried to get what they really think would work. It feels real, not like a movie prop.
It feels handmade. These feel 3D printed, and
it feels like a movie prop.
Mass production.
It's not awful, but it's just not quite that lived in. Somebody really sewed those buttons together, kind of thing,
Yeah. It feels more mass.
It's kind of a shame, because when you think about the amount of money they've spent in this show, an extra little bit on the costumes might have come in handy.
So that pretty much covers most of the mechanical stuff, technical stuff. It's solid. Excuse me. The story, I'm interested in it. I enjoyed getting a taste of really early elf life. The trees getting, messed with. I liked hearing a little bit of things that I had read of through some of the appendices and Silmarillion, thumbing through that. I never read all of it cover to cover at all. Just not my type of thing. Yeah. But I've always liked mythology. I always like world building and crazy stories. And I always like seeing how real human thoughts, history, and religion even plays into fantasy. And for those that might not know, Tolkien was allegedly, because I don't know the guy, but devout Catholic, and read even correspondence where some people were like, "Oh, we can't believe you have this like reincarnation type thing in your history. How could you do that?" And he's like, "Well, it's fantasy," And
I mean, it was never supposed to be allegory for him.
Exactly. It's not witch and wardrobe.
His fundamental beliefs dictate how he structures his world, rather than him saying, "This is how I think it all really works," because I don't think he was ever arrogant enough to say that he understands the religion he followed any better than anyone else who had studied it. This was his take of an a sort of English Saxon, if you like, mythology, as if before the Romans conquered and then the Normans conquered. It was like, what was that history? And this is kind of where he started it from. But as he did it, there was, he realised it was never going to quite fit with a modern world. It was never going to be as if somebody could say, oh, that was like really our history. He knew that wasn't the case, so he kind of ran with it that way and just it became his own thing after that.
And so I loved getting a lot of that in here. I think they balanced fairly well between your different peoples. We don't even meet the dwarves until episode 2, which I thought was good. That was a good setup. And yeah, nothing here absolutely blew me away story-wise. A lot of it I had heard pieces of before. It's not all fitting together the way that I can remember, which is fine because I get to enjoy it without without the weight of so much other knowledge on me. I give the first episode a good solid B, and I think the second episode I really enjoyed the stuff with Elrond and the dwarf.
Yeah,
already missing his name, Durin. I really enjoyed that, and I always love when in-universe rules affect people. The whole "I am your friend" 20 years, that whole thing. I won't go into spoilers, but that whole thing I loved. I thought that was great. So I would say episode 1 B, episode 2 B+.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I totally appreciate what you're saying in terms of, I think if you're going to have a story that involves the elves as main characters rather than kind of side characters, which they were a lot of time in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, you need to deal with mortal versus immortal and how different races view timelines, because it is very different from them all. And dwarves are far longer lived than humans are as well, but at the same time,
they're not elves.
Nothing compares to elves. When you think about the fact that Galadriel in this show is thousands of years older than Elrond, but they kind of look the same age, that's kind of the point, So, yeah, my thoughts then, Tolkien fan. I think if you are someone who is like really, really about, this must be an accurate adaptation, you must have got everything right that was on the page. I don't know if it's going to annoy you when things are slightly different. I don't know if this would be for you. Yet at the same time, I've seen a lot of people who were like me, hesitant and worried kind of about it, but excited at the same time, who have watched it and said, I really didn't give this show that much of a chance because I thought it was going to be this, it was going to be that, and it was actually really good and I enjoyed it. And although I was more willing to give it a chance than maybe some of these people, I do fall into the category of being really good and I enjoyed it. I think there were a couple of missteps, which we'll cover. Mostly round about Galadriel's story. There was a couple of things just didn't work for me. But I won't go into details until we get into the spoilers. But that's where I had a few issues. But I think the positives outweighed that. I think if you look at all the storylines that are in play, again, I won't go into them until we get into the spoiler talk, but, they were enjoyable. I was, well acted, well written. I mean, considering they have no dialogue to work with, they don't have Tolkien's dialogue, and you're never going to be that good because Tolkien was a genius at things like that, how people spoke in his world.
You can only take what you...
There was a beautiful, just to, almost way of words that he had. And I'm not expecting it to be at that level, but they're aiming for it. At least they're trying to make it feel, like Tolkien as much as possible. So that's good.
Like they pointed in the distance, which is Lord of the Rings. And I mean the books and the movies, of course. They pointed there and they're like, okay, now come back to this time period. We got to get them from here to there. You're going to have changes and stuff, but it's like they've got a semi blueprint. I'm going to be interested when we get to the history stuff, especially with Galadriel. How much does this kind of fit into the path that we know of how she got to where she is in Lord of the Rings? But that's for later.
Not so much. Anyway, No, I see what you mean, because I think here's the thing, right? See if you were one of those people that hated the Lord of the Rings movies, because they didn't have Tom Bombadil in it, or they made The Hobbit, they brought in too much comedy, right, to Lord of the Rings, which wasn't really there in the books. They were far more serious in the books. You know, the dwarves were, Gimli wasn't quite as funny, Frodo and the hobbits weren't quite as sort of funny in the books. If you hated that, I don't think you would like this. But see if you actually thought the Lord of the Rings films were really good adaptations, you might like this, because it's almost as if people have this memory block now where they think the Peter Jackson movies were these perfect adaptations. They really were not. They really weren't. And there was a lot of controversy about casting at the time. So, there's been a lot of controversy about having a more diverse cast in The Rings of Power, which I just quite frankly find ridiculous. I think the best quote I saw about that was that somebody was watching it with their dad, and their dad never knew about any of the controversy, never knew anything, just had loved the Lord of the Rings for films, read the books, and just watched the series without any build-up at all. And and afterwards, their son or daughter, I don't know who it is, then said to them, what did you think? Explained all the controversy, and they were like, I didn't even notice there was, it literally didn't even dawn on this guy that they had a black elf, or that they were bringing in a more diverse cast. And that's because it's well done. It doesn't feel like it's shoehorned in, it's trying to, it's a living, breathing world, and it makes sense in the day that we live in for it to be like that, to me. So
we don't have to rely on steamships to get across the Atlantic, meaning people are exposed to a lot more groups, and people are migrating a lot more.
Frankly, if Tolkien had put more ethnic minorities in positive roles in his books, they might never get published, because let's face it, there was an agenda back then, and lots of authors have talked about that in the past. And he was of a different era, a completely different era, and a completely different society, the one that
context
we live in right now.
Matters.
And a predominantly 95% white population that he lived in, whereas
probably
I come
more
from
like
the same
98
country
now.
Probably
or 98 then.
I stay in the same country Tolkien grew up, and it's a completely different world from that now. So so I think they did a really good job around all of that stuff. And the things that stood out to me the most were that there are some really jaw-dropping geek out moments for fans. So I won't get into the specifics, but there are a lot of shots just of things to see that I've imagined in my head so many times, because you only have that visual picture. And it's always, when Lord of the Rings came out, it was great to see that on screen. Oh, that's what they think Orthanc looks like, or that's what they think Barad-dûr and Mordor looks like, and you were meshing that, and we're kind of getting that here as well. We're seeing things that you've only ever imagined before, and that's really satisfying. And it is beautiful, and it is well recreated. So apart from a few missteps, one of them I would say, which it doesn't get any spoilers, I don't think the elves speak enough Elvish. Right? So I know that there's maybe Amazon think, we don't want people talking in subtitles all the time, But,
Americans need to get over that. I don't know how it is in UK, but we have a lot of resistance to
the scenes where Elrond is speaking to dwarfs. Of course, they're going to use English, right? When Galadriel's talking to humans, she's going to use English, right? That's normal. But when it's just elves together, why would they be using the kind of Westron tongue instead of their own tongues that they've been speaking together in? And all their magic's done in, or the way they write, so Elrond's writing a speech for Galad at one point, and it's like he's writing it in English. That why would he do that? Why would it not be in Quenya or something like that? Much I can't speak any of these languages. I can't even speak any other language other than English. It's real, so never mind speak one of the Elvish languages. But I just feel like maybe that's a note they could take into season 2. Trust the audience a bit more, use subtitles and get them speaking a bit more of the Elvish languages, and because it's kind of part of the whole romance of it all in this period. So my grade overall was, I would give, I averaged it out across the 2 as an A-, and I would say it was probably B+ for episode 1, because as much as there was some stuff I really loved about that, there were a few things I didn't. Episode 2 I thought was a superior episode as well. And I kind of had it really as a kind of almost an A+, or an A. So I'll kind of average them both out as an A-, but really B+ for episode 1, A for episode 2 is the way I would look at it.
That's pretty cool coming from a guy that's got the burden of knowledge on his shoulders with that.
That doesn't mean that I have seen people say they hated it. I have. I've read the reasons why, and some of them I don't quite understand. I think there was a lot of preconceived, I'm going to hate this, going in from people that they've not been able to get over yet. But as I said, if you can't handle the fact that, for example, the time compression, which we'll talk about a little bit when we get into spoilers, makes things really difficult here. So if you are quite happy to accept the fact that there's only seemingly been a few hundred years have passed since the end of the First Age, when Morgoth was defeated and a whole continent get basically covered under the sea, and Numenor get created from scratch. It was never there before, and all of these things have happened within a few hundred years. If you can't handle that, then maybe this show isn't for you. I accept that, but I can handle that, for the course of how they need to change things for a show.
Why did they need to compress the time?
Well, listen, right.
I mean, we can go ahead and get into the spoilers.
We can
get
into spoilers,
right?
And stuff like that. Yeah, but I won't do, and I'll just point this out for anybody listening, is I won't spoil. Oh yeah, at the end, this is what's going to happen.
Oh yeah.
This is what's going, because I don't want
spoilers up to this point. Yeah.
But if we talk about the kind of overall timeline, right, the Second Age lasts for about 3,000. Well, I'll say it is 3,441 years. That's a long-ass period of time, right?
It's almost as long as Senku was locked in stone. But anyways, go. I digress.
Third Age is 3,308, I believe, right? So it's slightly shorter. So remember, everything that was set in the Lord of the Rings is the very end of that Third Age, and you have thousands of years before that, the Third Age, right? And then the Second Age is another almost 4,000 years before that. So what they're doing here is they're taking almost like, right, this is post First Age, and we're looking for the enemy, trying to root out anybody that's left so we can go on and live our peaceful lives. At the same time, I think where you have the elves is some of them are reluctant to go west back to Valinor and would rather stay in Middle-earth. So they're looking for ways that that they can do that, how they can make Middle-earth a beautiful and better place so that they don't have to go back to Valinor, they can stay where they are. That's their kind of thing that's going on at this time. And then Sauron kind of shows up and causes a lot of problems for everyone. But if you look at Numenor, for example, which we haven't met yet, I think we're going to meet them in episode 3, right? But we all know from the promotional material that Numenor's a big player in this, and Galadriel's probably going to go there. So, but like the period that they're going to be in when we see them this show is towards the end of the Second Age. So let's say like 3,000 odds, into the Second Age, whereas what's happening with the elves at the moment is like a couple of hundred years into the Second Age. Does that make sense? So we're taking a period from the end, and they're mixing all that and smashing it together. So the events that are going to happen much faster over a shorter space of time than they ever did. And partly that is because it's kind of told from an elfish point of view, if you like, and really long-lived men like the Númenóreans, not hobbits and dwarfs and stuff like that. So there would be many, many generations. So somebody like Halbrand that you meet in episode 1, if they really followed the timeline, by episode 2, he's been dead for 300 years, you know what I mean? And his skeleton sitting there because, that time just doesn't matter, the same elvish characters. So I can kind of understand why they did it, but there will be times where it will conflict, and that's where I think they could potentially come up with some issues in how they then develop that story forward. I won't get into the specifics of where the story's going, all the big climaxes, and as I said, we'll let people kind of work that out. If you know you know. If you're a book reader, you know all about it anyway, so you don't need me to tell you. And if you've not, either pick up the books and read them. You can Wikipedia if you really want to know, and just you want the quick hit, you know, this is what happens in the Second Age. And for everyone else that kind of just wants to follow the story along, then we'll try to do that as much as possible.
I guess it kind of especially if you can get your mind into that. Crap, I forgot to change the camera over. If you can get your mind into the setting that this is from, like you said, an elf point of view, and that maybe ignore some of the alleged timeline. Do it like people that try to do young Earth model stuff.
Yeah, just ignore stuff.
Just ignore.
People that think the Earth's only like 6,000 years old, just do that. Squish things, just chop it.
Squish it together.
And, you know, it doesn't matter. That's kind of what we're doing in some ways. One of the things I'm going to be really interested to find out, because there's nothing that really tells me this. We talked about this a little bit on like Discord or Slack or something. Is, are we in a flat Earth at this point?
At this point, yeah.
If we go by Tolkien's writings, at this point it was not a globe, it was a flat Earth where the Undying Lands and Middle Earth are connected, and you can literally sail from one to the other, as we see Galadriel do at this point. Whereas later on, once it's a globe, like we have in this day and age, that cannot be accessed. You know, you or I could not jump my boat and sail there. It has to be, you know, in other words, I don't know whether they float up into space or something like that, you know, or go into some alternate dimension.
Ascend into heaven.
Yeah, I don't know how it actually works at that point. Like when Gandalf and that go away at the end of Lord of the Rings, what happens when they get there? Couldn't tell you. Tolkien never wrote about that. Yeah, I'm interested to see whether they're going to keep that or not, because I kind of think it might cause them more problems than it helps, if that makes sense. Kel, do you know, like, how do you actually do a story with a flat Earth? And then you have to think about, well, it has to be daylight and nighttime the same everywhere at the same time.
I mean, do they've kind of touched on it, you know, the time before the sun, time before sunrise, sunset. I think just kind of keeping it vague like that. Yeah. I don't think they'll ever have to.
They don't say
talk about flat versus round,
unless it comes up towards the end of the show. Because in the Second Age is the point where it goes from flat to round. You know, without spoiling. You know, is it really that big of a deal? No, is it really that big of a deal when it goes flat to round? Like, is it something that they should have to? I mean, I don't necessarily think it is. I would guess
like the event could happen, but the result doesn't have to still be.
The events that cause it, yes, they all have to happen,
right?
And that's really, really important. But that doesn't necessarily have to be how it happens at that point. Because realistically, how do you make that? How do you take something that's imagine the destruction that would cause just on a scale, you know?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. So
if I were doing the show, that's how I would do it. I would just have it. Here's the events, the effects that aren't earth shattering, reshaping physically. We'll ignore that as an effect. That's how I would do it.
All right. So, should we get into a little bit of some of the specific criticism?
Yeah, spoilery criticism. What you mentioned something at first with Galadriel,
yeah. So Galadriel, they've painted. I get what they're doing with Galadriel's character. So they're saying this is not. It's kind of like what we talked about in Obi-Wan Kenobi. When you see Obi-Wan, he's kind of a broken and defeated man, because they want him to have that arc towards the Alec Guinness character, right? You need to give your main character an arc. So you've got to give Galadriel an arc. So they've made her like vengeance, you know, she's like really unsettled, she's unhappy, you know, she's almost obsessed with finding Sauron and proving that he hasn't died and is still alive at this point and has escaped the wrath of the Valar, etc., and is still a threat. Because ultimately, and this does follow the books, that Finrod, her brother, who's the one you see going around it, though they'd never mention his name. I don't know whether that's for legal reasons. But he, it is kind of Sauron's how he meets his end, if you like, but not in the way that they they kind of really, there's a really famous story from Tolkien's mythology that's changed very little over the years, so it's kind of solid canon, and that's the Lay of Luthien, if you like, the story of Beren and Luthien, who were the first elf and mortal to fall in love,
right?
You know, and their story, and it's almost like it's the fundamental linchpin for everything that happens in the first stage roundabout and afterwards. And if it wasn't for them and what they did, there's no Elrond. And there's no Elros, his brother, that's where Numenor comes from, or anything like that. All this stuff that it doesn't happen if that event doesn't happen. And Finrod is very, very much involved in that story. And he meets his end during that kind of story of Beren and Luthien, if you like, and it definitely is at Sauron's hands. However, they kind of almost make it seem like Sauron just captured them and branded them with a kind of a sign. I don't know what they were going with there in the show, but I get it. Maybe they don't have the rights to kind of tell us any more of that story, if you like, or so they're just kind of vaguely painting it in the background. So I can kind of accept that, but I'm just not sure if I'm on board with Galadriel as the warrior type. I'm absolutely the way Tolkien described it at one point, I think, was Amazon-like in our earlier days, but he did change Galadriel's story a lot, right? So it's very hard to pinpoint like how accurate this is. The truth is, it's really just made up what they're doing with Galadriel at this moment in time, because I think Galadriel was kind of almost an invention that Tolkien had when he wrote Lord of the Rings. Most of that mythology was written before Lord of the Rings, and then after Lord of the Rings came out, he started fitting it all in to how that all worked for the appendices, and then he started rewriting all his notes again, and he kept bringing Galadriel in and changing where she would fit into the story and who she was and all that sort of stuff, and he never quite defined one thing for that, but he never wrote a lot about her either, certainly not at this period of time. So like in the Second Age, she was just there in the background. She was in London, I think, at the time, and she was one of the Gil-galad might have been the king, but she must have been one of the senior people, and she was just there doing stuff. We don't know too much about what she got up to in the first stage, really. Little bits and bobs. But he did describe her once as kind of Amazon-like, if you like. And I'm okay with that, because elf warriors, whether they're female or male, are going to beat most men warriors. Male's the wrong term.
When you live that long, you can train to be good at so many things, including killing.
And swords. And we talked about that like troll scene, right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of did annoy me that like there's 6 or 8 elves there.
Yeah, just let her take care of it.
The only one that's like giving it the Legolas moves from the movies, kind of thing.
Yep.
And actually, why not have? I think it would have been better to have 2 or 3 of them involved.
Her leading a team to attack.
Because the other ones get surprised. I mean, I like the way that they're getting slammed into the walls in ways that kill humans, and they're still surviving at the end of it, because it takes a lot more to kill an elf than it does a human. So they can endure far more. So they all survive that. None of them get killed there, which was cool. But I think they could have took it down together. Would have been slightly better than her having to save the day.
I think it really did. And even Christine, my wife, said the same thing. I think it really did get really close to that in-game A-Force level of in-your-face, hey, look, it's a girl doing it. We don't care that there's a girl doing it. I've got a poster
there was other girls in the team.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and I was going to say, personally, I've got a poster of Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn. Trust me, I have no issues with strong female leads. But when you've got a team of elves and they're going to take on a troll, you would expect that to be a team effort. And like you said, there's other females on the team.
There's detractors that will say, if that had been the male star, you wouldn't have commented on it. There is people who say that. Actually,
I would 100% wonder why the team wasn't involved.
Snow, right? And he was with if I'm going Game of Thrones here, he was with the people that can't fight.
Yeah.
Right? Then you'd understand why Jon has to step in.
Yep.
But that's not we're talking about elf soldiers here who have been specifically selected and sent with Galadriel as the commander to search out enemies and destroy them. I just think they would have been a bit more switched on. The first couple getting caught by surprise absolutely shows that this troll's dangerous. But after that, Galadriel, I should have took a more commander role, organised them, swords out,
Yep.
speak to them in Elvish or something and get them, and then suddenly they all work together, and maybe she gives it still the killing blow would be absolutely
and you show
fine.
that. You show that not only is she a great warrior in and of herself, but despite the tensions, because of this search going on too long, that she is a smart leader still. Yeah. And it was just kind of wasted to go, hey, look, badass chick. Yeah, dude, we get it.
She's been leading. She's been a prominent figure. She's from a very powerful family, in terms of her background, so she's that's why she's in charge. She's had thousands of years to learn how to lead and been through far worse situations than that in the first age.
In an attempt to make a statement, you missed making a better one. It seems. I
would say so. Yeah, I think it would have been. Yeah, it would have just worked better the other way. So that's where I had a couple of issues with Galadriel. Now we then have she gets awarded for her award for all your efforts. I'm sending you home, and it kind of feels like Galad's like, you know what, you're too much hassle now.
Exactly, that's what it is.
That doesn't really. I didn't like that so much because I think Galad's. I think Galadriel was a bit too important for Galad, despite him being the High King. He just dismissed and sent to Valinor. I think the Galadriel from the books goes, hold on a minute, motherfucker. You ain't sending me anywhere. I could go and start my own elf colony somewhere else and I'll be the lead of it if I wanted. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of where she is power level wise. So it's a bit strange for him to kind of send her away. Also, with Galadriel's character, she's someone that, we'll talk a little bit about something that happened in the first age, a very important kind of thing, which was her people, the Noldor, right? So she's directly related to Fëanor, who you heard Celebrimbor and Elrond discuss.
See, can we talk about that real quick? Why the fuck are they giving it a, sorry about the F-bomb, I'm not going to find it to cut it out, but why are they using a hard, like, Celebrimbor in the show?
It must be the way it's supposed to be pronounced, but I'm like you with the Star Wars stuff.
But wasn't it Celebrimbor in the games, like the Shadow of War and Mordor?
Absolutely. I mean, they are not connected to canon.
I get that, but isn't that the first time? Isn't that the first time with a licensed Lord of the Rings that it was pronounced?
How these things works. So they'll have got experts that will have said actually you would pronounce that with K. And I've maybe just never picked that up because you read it over the years. I think it's true though, because I always used to call Galadriel's future husband potentially Celeborn, right? But I used to call him Celeborn when I was younger and I was reading the books and there had never been any movies. But then when you see the movie and it's Celeborn, you think, right, so they're probably being right and I'm wrong.
That's probably right.
That one.
Yeah.
It's just getting my head used to it.
It's
probably as Celebrimbor, yeah. So, and they're talking about the Silmarils, which is, the Silmarils are these jewels that were made from the light of the two trees, and that's really what set the whole events off of the first stage, right? But all the Noldor kind of left to go and get them back from Morgoth, and they all made vows and stuff. And, they did a few crappy things on the way, which I won't get into. There's a bit called the Kinslaying, for example, which, although Galadriel was never directly involved with as such, her people were. So there was always this, although after the end of the first stage, we were like to the elves, you can all come back to Valinor, that Galadriel was hesitant. So that was kind of always in Tolkien's writings anyway, but for different reasons, more for, would she be welcome back? Has she really, should she be, does she deserve to kind of go back to her home again, And remember, elves being immortal doesn't mean like when they die, they're dead as well. So she could go and see Finrod again, potentially, because they stay so long in the halls of Mandos and then they can come back and get another body. Probably very rarely they would go back to Middle Earth again, but theoretically, she can go back to Valinor,
that some
to
had
your
an
dad,
issue with.
to your brother, all that sort of stuff as well. It doesn't have reincarnation for men though, and that's the thing, because this is a completely different species from us. The way the elves are there till the earth is gone, they can never leave it. The gift of men is that we can leave it. We can leave the confines of the earth and the physical and transcend into something else, but he never described what that is because he felt, who is he to give, describe what you know, the afterlife's like, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, and I get what they're saying about our motivations, but I just think they could have maybe did it a different way that would have stuck kind of closer to the books as well. Have her maybe reminisce about this and have that as a motivation, not just the fact that Sauron's killed her brother, but that after everything that happened, can she go back? Would she be welcomed back? You know, and almost like maybe telling herself that she needs to do more here first before she can go. And equally, there was the one scene where they're going to Valinor, right? And it was beautiful, right? So, you know, you see the clouds sort of roll back, the birds fly out, and the elves just start singing. You know, again, they talked about a song that they didn't know they knew, and they all start singing it, and she's just like, this isn't for me kind of thing. That was so beautiful and well done, right? And it was one of those things that you kind of just always imagined in your head, but you wanted to see on screen. But her just jumping off the boat, you know, that far from any shores, you know, it's basically her committing suicide. Even for an elf, without water, she cannot swim that far back.
Yeah.
And she must know that. So is that a suicide attempt then at that point? I mean, that's where it got a bit. See if she jumped off sooner.
Oh, I know. I think that's just the I think that's just the showrunners, writers just looking to do something and have you not look that far into it. They're going to need you to get all the way off their back, Cam. All the way off their back on that one.
I know. It's like, I mean, I made the kind of joke in my written review, you know, that she's going to be swimming for us. She must be some swimmer. I don't think the idea is that she was going to swim back to Middle-earth, because that's just silly. I mean, like, the distances we're talking there is like, it's an ocean, right? It's like her swimming across the Atlantic Ocean. It ain't happening. Right,
and not from France to England.
No, it's not.
The full like Atlantic Ocean.
No, like people have actually swam that before, and they'll probably manage it in an afternoon. You know, it ain't that. It's like Atlantic Ocean, maybe even Pacific. Actually, to be honest, if we're really accurate. So
from America to Australia.
it ain't happening. You know, irrespective of the fact that you would die of thirst across the way, But, you know, if they had just had, like, maybe there was I don't know why they would have them. Maybe they would have to have a reason why they had, like, a boat or something that was connected to the side. But if they had given her that and she just, like, cut it with her sword, jumped in and just started rowing back again. And actually, I could have believed that an elf, like, maybe if she had some water, she'd grab some water and food supplies, you know, and put them in. But really, there wasn't time with the way they were doing it in that shot to do all that. You know, they couldn't have. Really. If you had Galadriel go start gathering supplies, cut off a boat, you know, make sure she had enough water, grab some oars. By that time, they're through the curtain and they're away, you know.
This is the type of thing where if they had done stuff like that, Jammer would have been out. It's too much detail for Janet.
I get that you don't need it, but in some way that I have to think.
I'm the same way sometimes, man.
Motivation here, you know, and the only thing I can think of is that I would rather die than go back to Valinor.
Such an illogical jump.
If she dies in that sea, guess where she goes?
She goes right there.
She goes right there. But she has to wait in Mandos for maybe a few thousand years before she gets to come back out. It's almost pointless. And, you know, that's not how I don't think an elven character like Galadriel would think in that
situation. They're either saying that the water distance isn't as far because the type of boat they were on also was like.
But it's an elvish boat.
Are you really going to be on there for like that?
You know.
I guess. I think they just want us all
probably
the
Valar are probably see them coming and can say, right, no bad winds, no bad seas here. I mean, there's a literal god of the water who could be underneath them going, I'll keep the waves down for these chaps since they're one of our own, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're talking about. So, you know, theoretically, you know, they could go anywhere that the powers that be allow them to go. So,
maybe it's like swimming across the channel instead of the ocean.
Yeah, you know, that's going to cause a problem when they introduce Numenor, which is an island that's halfway between Middle-earth and Valinor. But even they're not allowed to sail that far west. That they can go there. There's a point to turn back. They have to be able to see their own the tip of their own land, and if they go further than that, they're not allowed, kind of thing. So there's a rule. So they really are going to have to explain the distances at some point and show us it in those little maps that they have going about. Here's another criticism I've got: the maps. All right. So we see them, but I don't think they almost have them up on screen long enough for us to get a feel of where they're going. Does that make sense to you, Kel?
Yeah. It was very confusing, and they're moving and they're angled, and it's.
I mean, I know where they are because I know the map, right? But did you have an idea of where they were at all these
not until we get to the Southlands or Hitherlands or whatever they called it.
It's called Tirharid, but it's the Southlands,
Because this is all set on kind of like the northwest of the continent, and that's like the southern part of that area, if I remember right. So there was just like some vague, like, I kind of know where we are,
from
but
the scenery they
not
showed you in the Southlands. Have you looked at any of the Easter eggs that they're showing you there yet?
Oh, I mean, like, you get shots of what looks to be like, future Shire and stuff like that, right?
No.
Because that's what it was kind of feeling like with the Not Hobbitses. Oh, when they're talking like this used to be a crag and stuff like that.
You can see when what's his name, Arondir and his commander are looking out from that tower. Yeah. There's a singular peak that you can see in the distance.
And he mentioned how it used to all be rock, and that's what it kind of returns to later on. So I caught that.
I think that's one of the reasons their story, the Southland story, is intriguing me so much, because I kind of know it ain't going to go well for those guys down there. Ultimately,
no, it already started not going. I don't know how long it'll
take for that to kick in, but that is not the lands where they're getting much protection from anyone. And I would even go as far as to say, see that tower that they're in, which is their watchtower, that actually becomes the Tower of Cirith Ungol, which you see in which Sam goes in to fight to try and rescue Frodo from in Mordor. And the third Lord of the Rings, it looks very similar to that, the shape and all that.
I found that whole storyline, and you'll have to forgive me for names, but your elf in love with the human there in that village. I was digging most of that. I like her having the kid who's a little bit of a jerk, a kid that's a little insecure about his very attractive mother attracting all sorts of attention that the humans aren't necessarily very fond of.
Sword as well.
Yeah, and he had a nifty little angry-looking sword, very reminiscent of some bad stuff we've seen before, but in the future,
does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And that little glowing emblem on it, it sucks blood out of people. I liked all of that. You get your first orc.
What did you think of the orcs?
It was fine. I dug it. I mean,
I thought it looked better than some of the ones in the films do. Actually.
Some of them.
Certainly the Hobbits, when they were all CGI, they looked better than that.
Yeah, definitely. They were good. I did. I enjoyed it. They looked creepy. I liked some of the horror movie kind of elements they used when the one's in the house, messing with the kid. Yeah. And I'm excited to see that because, like you said, it deals with, kind of where this all leads up to Mordor and crap like that, and seeing all that type of history is cool. I enjoyed that aspect quite a bit. Her character and the elf she's with, are they just show creations, or is there any
definitely show creations? Okay. I mean, there's not a lot of history about that was written about that land, because I guess there wasn't anything left by the time they were writing the histories of probably people to write about it, so it was more about what that became, going forward or anything like that, rather than in specific from that period.
I mean, we know what Celebrimbor creates. We know what Sauron is doing and after. Do you think that that story is going to be the huge focus of this series, and are you happy with that, or do you know what I'm trying to get at?
I think they're going to do the whole Second Age across the 5 seasons, is what I think. That's why they're doing the time compression. So I think, the thing that I think unless you've never read any Lord of the Rings books or watched the films, I think you know about the Rings of Power, probably, It's the title of the show, Rings of Power. So we know they're coming. I think that's a season 2 that we see the Rings of Power get forged and created, and possibly Sauron make the One Ring at that point.
Already talking about building the forge.
yeah. I mean, that's where their story, that's where Celebrimbor's story is absolutely head. He's talking about how, it takes sacrifice, true creation. He wants to do something that almost matches kind of like Fëanor. And, it also matches where Gil-galad's head is at, and kind of like maintaining and making Middle-earth as best as it possibly can. And the rings are with the 3 that end up getting created for the elves, are designed with that purpose in mind, to keep things from fading and keep that beautiful kind of almost agelessness in Middle-earth, rather than have all the elves have to go back to Valinor again. That's the kind of whole point of them. And then sort of just Sauron does his thing in the background. But, but then in Tolkien's Second Age, it's not as if Sauron gets the ring and then they have a big fight and that's the end of it. There are thousands of years of Sauron having the ring, because unlike in The Lord of the Rings, where he had this huge military advantage, he doesn't have a huge military advantage at this point in the Second Age. Look, there's 2 giant cities full of elves for a start, 2 completely different cities we saw. We saw Lindon, and we saw, what's the other one? Eregion. Yeah, Eregion, where Celebrimbor's from. So that's 2 giant elvish cities, both far bigger than like Rivendell or Lorien were at the time of Lord of the Rings, which, that's all they've got left at that point.
Yeah.
We have the entire of Khazad-dûm is just one dwarf kingdom, and it's full of people, and they haven't, it's not overrun by bad guys yet.
Yeah.
And then we have the entire island of Numenor, which is basically like the superpower of this age. They have no threats, and they're really, really successful in everything that they do. They have this huge society and this massive naval force, to the point where, if we go by the books, I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, even Sauron with the ring on his finger is like, I don't think I can win this fight at some point against all these guys. That's what we're talking about, and I think they do need to, because part of the skill of what Sauron does then is how he deals with that situation and still tries to come out on top, if you like, so, and I think we're going to see all that
against each other and stuff. Yeah.
We're going to find out why, Numenor isn't really there anymore come the movies, and why all those people became the Gondor people, why all that happened, and they ended up with the last. So I think the last thing we'll see, season 5 will be the last alliance of men and elves, which is the prologue of Lord of the Rings. I think that's how they'll tie it all up. They'll have this big battle against Sauron and Mordor, and the ring will be cut from Sauron's hand. All stuff that I'm not talking about. I'm not considering spoilers, because again, you've never watched the films. You've not. If you're coming at this brand new, why even listen to a podcast? Don't start with the Rings of Power. Start somewhere else.
Lord of the Rings movies. Good entry point. Let's talk about the other big character. Let's talk Elrond, man. How you feeling about good old Elrond right now? Because I like him.
I like him, yeah. I know it's interesting. We should point out that, remember, this was supposed to be Will Poulter, who is now Adam Warlock, and he left this role for the Adam Warlock role. And Robert Aramayo, who played young Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, came in to play Elrond. I don't know what Will Poulter would have been like, so I'm not going to comment on that really, but I really like Robert Aramayo as Elrond. Yeah. It really comes across well to me, considering, it's a hard thing to live up to Hugo Weaving, if you like, but Hugo Weaving's a much older and wiser version of this character. But yeah, no, I really like Elrond. Yeah.
I found him a decent actor, and the roles being shown real well. My favorite stuff, like I said, deals with him and Durin. I love that I love that moment. You know, come on, Brimbor, let's go ask a favor from my friend. And then the friend's like, get bent, you
I
know,
haven't seen you
get out
for,
of here. I
haven't
haven't
seen you
seen
for
you for
20 years.
years, you know. And while, like you said, while dwarves definitely do live longer than humans, they're
20
not
years is
elves,
still a
and
long time.
20 years
Yep.
is still a long time. He's gotten married, he's had kids, he's pissed, man. You went off and did your hoity-toity elvish stuff and left
Yeah.
me here toiling in these rocks. Get bent. And I love the competition. Let's break rocks.
Yeah.
And the moment between them where Elrond, you know, breaks the hammer and then concedes, you can see him kind of look over at Durin, and I don't know if Durin was really reaching like the end of his strength, and he was like, dude, I don't beat me type thing, because he's still really angry at him, but it did look like there was a moment of, okay, we can end this. We can end this.
If we go by the lore, I mean, it would be a really long competition, because the thing about dwarfs is elves are, I mean, a man would have just no chance in that competition, right? It's not even but dwarfs are really, really hardy. You know, that's what that endurance is one of their defining traits. But could they do it as long as an elf who could probably eat a tiny bit of lemon bread and go, right, I'm fully charged for another 100 years, let's go, chop, 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 chop. You know?
Exactly.
I actually thought, we got advertised that they were doing that. I thought they were going to do it so that they had to keep breaking the stone smaller. And as it got smaller and smaller, Elrond would have got better, because his preciseness as an elf would have took over. But I get what it worked. It worked.
It was a great scene, and talk about how great Khazad-dûm.
Yeah, looks great, doesn't it?
It looks so good. It looks. If you want to do it, probably so good.
Khazad-dûm.
I'm not gonna with my speech issues as well, but
Scottish, we can do that.
There you go. It looked great, and again, shadows do help hide, you know, composites and CGI, but it looked really good. And whenever they're in a physical set, Durin's home, like I was impressed on how much physical stuff felt. The Dwarven lands looked a lot better than some of the Elvish lands, and that's only because the Elvish lands are also a lot brighter and
I get that,
and have a lot more light sources to play with, and the depth of field when you're, you know, ground level outside.
They're like moving the light around with mirrors, and there's internal waterfalls and all that, and lifts, you know, because the dwarves were miners, you know. It's it feels like a technologically advanced civilization, you know.
As a former, well, I'll always be an army engineer, but as an engineer, I can definitely appreciate the dwarven peoples. I really did. I dig it. Elrond is at the risk of someone yelling, "You sexist pig!" I'm more interested in his story at this point than Galadriel's. Not that I'm not interested in hers, but he's about to get into things dealing with politics and side deals and backdoor shit, and just
I think his goal is he needs to learn to be a leader.
Exactly, and he's about to go through.
Given his heritage is pretty strong, and
he's about to go through all of that, and this is one of those things where you're hoping that we get a really good balance of the action and then the world building and politics, if you will, the society, right? The goings on. I'm more interested in general, so long as I get good action, I'm more interested in this side of things. So it's not a knock against Galadriel in this case, and I just hope that when they use her as the balance for all the action stuff, that it is a good balance. Because if it's too much of one or the other, it's gonna kind of
it's all about balance. I mean, one of the things I loved about these two episodes is there's not a lot of action. You know, it's used sparingly, and it should be. You know, there shouldn't have to be something that exciting happen necessarily every episode. Ultimately, this is a bit a character journey. It's a drama about people changing. Some of them not humans, okay, and that changes how they look at things. But you know, we're going to get into human characters and how things how they deal with the situations that are going on. That's what attracts us to it, rather than just battle scenes and orcs and stuff like that. But we're going to get them too. So I agree with you. It's finding the balance. Yeah.
Yep. Have you heard about the controversy with Elrond?
No, I don't think I have. Amazingly, right? Hit me with it.
Online discussions about whether or not he is gay, or that he is, even though it's not. Yeah, the character. It's apparently the tension between him and certain male other characters. Like, I could see some of it potentially. I guess Celebrimbor. No, I think it's Celebrimbor and
I think it's just
the Elvish king, the king, the head elf at
what we have to remember is that in the Lord of the Rings, Aragorn marries Elrond's daughter, Arwen. So at some point he's going to get married and have his own kids. I think. Like I
said, it's the controversy. Even Grace Randolph came out and was like, "Hey, he's definitely." I don't know if they're saying what does some people say, coded, but like you said, maybe he's supposed to be bisexual. Maybe people aren't connecting the dots here. I don't know, but there is controversy over him, and I was just wondering if you felt...
Could they make him bisexual and then later on he still gets with the female character that he has to continue the story on the way it goes? I mean, I guess they could do that, but I don't really feel like it's... I think it would be putting it in there to put it in there.
Yeah, that's the thing that...
I think if you could show...
That's the conversation.
You could show, if you want to show, it'll be, QT characters. I would have thought that,
there's already characters,
the humans
or there are characters you can create for that.
We have no evidence that that's even something that happens within elves.
Well, I was even going to ask, is sex even that big of a thing for elves?
It's not like us, right? Mortals are fast. Everything happens fast. So we read much faster than elves. If you imagine these elves live for thousands of years.
They don't need kids every few. They don't need more than one kid every 2 or 3 centuries.
As old as them almost,
exactly.
And they all just are like us running about at this age, forever. And then their grandkids all end up adults and great grandkids and so on and so forth. The way Tolkien described elvish lovemaking, not to get into it, was that there's certain periods of their life where they would do that. There's certain periods of life where they would be more likely to marry, to think about having children. But that isn't as primal a driver for them as it is for mortals.
Love is so, not the
for example, Galadriel and Elrond, they spend hundreds of years sometimes potentially away from their wives or partners, and that's kind of okay, because you're just going to see them further down the road again. It's not like mortals where we're kind of living our whole lives together in that way. They are very, very different. So could there be elves who 2 males decide to become that companion and just not have any kind of kids? I don't see any issue with that, really, but Tolkien certainly never described it, and I think it would be the wrong place to put it in, because you're then treading water you don't understand at that point. How can we describe how a different species from us feels about things? What we can do is we can talk about humans, because we are human, and we can talk about the homosexuality, all these different sort of sexual, preferences and orientations that we have are true as humans, because we experience that. So if that was me, this is just me. If I want to bring that in, I bring it in human characters, because I can understand it in human characters and I can explain how that works with human characters. But that would be a trickier thing to bring in. So I don't see them going that way. I don't think that from it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think there's anything outright, but people are saying that. And like I said, I think it's the tension between him and the Elf King, maybe, or Celebrimbor, that I think people are reading into it.
Gil-galad is trying to train Elrond to be a leader. One day he sees that, one day Elrond's going to be a leader of his own people. He has that heritage. This is a guy who, the hero that saved all the elves in the First Age. Elrond's his son. You know, he's now a star that goes across the sky. He's so revered. Do you know what I mean? So you know, Elrond, and that goes back to Beren and Luthien, who saved everybody, kind of like, and whose story helped save everybody again. And you know, so you know, his is the most important bloodline, if you like, that's in the show. Elrond's at this point, you know, and ultimately that becomes Aragorn's bloodline as well, because Elrond and Elros, because they had half human, half elf blood, they had the choice to either remain elf or become mortal. Elrond chose to remain with the elf kind. His brother Elros chose to be immortal, and he was the first king of Numenor.
Yeah.
Right? But he's long dead.
Oh, yeah.
You know, well, actually, because this is just after the First Age, he should theoretically be able to nip over and say hello to his brother. But, you know, the way they're playing it is this is later Numenor at this point. Again, this is a time compression thing, how they're going to make this work. This is where it causes problems. But Elros is long gone, you know, and it's his descendants now that are the people that we're seeing in Numenor. But they're still Elrond's blood, if you like, you know.
And I just, you know, whatever they do. If they try to make it ambiguous, which is funny because the Saturday Night Live or was it Mad TV's ambiguously gay duo, but if they make it ambiguous about him, then they're gonna piss off a lot of people in the LGBT community with what do they call it? Queer baiting, I think is the term. Sorry if I'm using the wrong one.
See, I don't think, you know, you could have so much respect. I think
people are
someone,
reading too much into it.
I think that's what it is. I mean,
I do.
This is Celebrimbor, right? This is a descendant of Fëanor, and currently Celebrimbor is the greatest elven smith in existence. He's not quite what Fëanor was, but then they said his light never comes again. That's the whole point of Tolkien, that things are never quite as powerful, as good as they were earlier on. Right? So there'll never be someone like Fëanor again. Even Gandalf and Lord of the Rings talks about, you know, to be able to see Fëanor work when he created these masterpieces would be, you know, to see that again would be such a treat. You know, so that's who Celebrimbor is. And I just think Elrond's looking at him in a revered sort of way, you know, rather than a that. So I just don't see it. Yeah, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, like I said, it's not me. I saw it. You know, I watched it.
Elves are far more feminine as well. Like, you know,
exactly.
That's
what I was.
They're not as like macho testosterone going.
They don't need
elves,
to be.
So they are far more. The men are far more feminine traded than men are. Yeah. You know.
So I just wanted to see what you thought on it. So
you know, I don't
think.
You could cry on each other's shoulder, you know, and it would be just normal, and you would weep together for the loss of a loved one. That's the way Tolkien wrote them, you know.
Elves come off angelic, if you will, in a way. A lot of their imagery and angelic figures, especially in Judeo-Christian artwork, and you often see very, like you said, effeminate or androgynous kind of looks for that. So it, to me, people will read into whatever they want, but like Cam had said, and like the books and movies have shown, he at least does make with a female elf. So
100%. Yeah, they won't. I know that they're not allowed to like change something, so like say that that's not like they can't kill off Elrond, for example, right? They can't do that, which means he has to follow the story that he followed in the books in some sort of sense. Let's go talking about angels. Let's talk about angelic characters. All right.
Meteor Man, is that where we're headed?
Man, let's talk
Meteor Man and
the
Not Hobbitses.
Yeah, so we've got obviously the Half-Roots, which are early sort of proto-hobbits. You might hate that if you're a Tolkien purist, but Tolkien did say that as far as he was concerned, the hobbits must have existed in the Second Age. He just said there was nothing written about them, and he didn't know what they were like or where they came from. You know, they weren't included in any of the tales. So the first time he wrote about them was really the Stoors, which is Smeagol, you know, Gollum, and then that was long before they made the Shire or anything like that. So, you know, I get what the show is doing. They're taking that. I believe there would have been hobbits in existence, and they've kind of done the smart thing is that people don't see them because they sneaky and they hide and they stay away from the big folk, you know, so it makes sense. But
And
it
they're
does bring in the
half-foot
whole
or Harfoot?
Harfoots.
Okay.
Right. So that's what they call themselves ultimately. I mean, it's just a name. Like we call ourselves,
Yeah.
you call yourself American, I would call myself British, maybe, or Scottish. You know, that's kind of Harfoot Hobbit, you know, if you like.
Yeah.
Really, rather than anything else. But yeah, so they come across this guy who, just as Galadriel's about to go through to Valinor, that's when this meteor seems to arrive. Which could be a red herring, I don't know. Very unsure about this at the moment. And this guy comes out. He can't really talk much. He seems to be talking in Quenya, like it's Elvish language he's using, and the Harfoots are talking, you know, common tongue, so you know he can't understand what they're saying. Seems to be very confused and, you know, very wary and all that sort of stuff. And of course, the big debate online is who is this character and who it's going to be. And I've seen people really get upset and get into some big arguments about this
It's
already.
Gandalf. No, it's Sauron.
Yeah.
No, it's
the arguments.
brown
I've seen people
wizard.
say, like, I am telling you 100% this is Gandalf. It cannot be anybody else. And I'm like, that's not true. Actually, there's really lots of people this could be, actually, and there's a few different options, let's say. And then I've seen people say that ultimately this is Sauron. This is actually Sauron that we're looking at here, and he doesn't remember he's Sauron or anything like that. That makes sense. I'm not sure it does at this point.
I don't really think it's that one.
What do you think? What's your thoughts on Meteor Man so far? Before I get into mine,
I honestly think it's either a deep cut character, or because I told you yesterday, I think it's one of those angelic beings.
It's not an elf, a dwarf,
between
a man,
Ea or whatever the head deity is, and the people before the elves, somewhere in between.
So you've got Elevator, which is like God. You've got you've then different classes of beings that are all immortal spirit beings, right? Like angel type beings, and you've got the Valar, are the most senior, right? And then there's the kind of your next is Maya, right? So
I'm not sure if he's Valar or the one below that, but I think he's in that. He's in that top.
He's not Valar. Because they wouldn't do what
he's in that top.
Yeah,
top thing
that's
though.
Like Morgoth was a Valar. Right?
Okay, so then that next one below.
Sauron's the next level down from that.
So I think Meteor Man is there, and he's either a deep cut. I don't know if there's a particular one out there you can think of that might be, or he's a show creation to be exposition or set something in motion. I don't necessarily think he is a big player that we already know. What do you think?
I think it's one of the blue wizards. That's what I think they're going with this, that it's one of the blue wizards. See, there were 5 wizards that came to Middle-earth in Tolkien's mythology, right? Now, 3 of them everybody knows really well because they're in The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbits movie. Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, the guy that runs about with the rabbits and the Hobbit, right?
The brown guy, yeah.
Yeah, right. But there was 2 other ones. Now, I don't know what their names would be later on, but it was Palando and Alan. I can't remember. Palando was definitely one of them. I can't remember the other guy's name, right?
Okay.
And one was asked to go by the Valar, and he said, "I'll only go if my mate comes with me as well." So they kind of went as a pair, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
But Tolkien had 2 different versions of what happened to them. In his earliest version, Tolkien had that they came at the same time as Gandalf, Saruman, and Radagast, but they went east. And we didn't hear much about what they did because what they did was over in the east. And Tolkien played with 2 possibilities, that either they stayed good and true to their mission and they helped suppress Sauron in the east, or that they failed in their mission and maybe created cults and actually, didn't do a good job. The most recent revision that he made before his death, though, was that he decided he toyed with the idea of having those 2 come earlier in the Second Age, which is where we are at the moment.
Yeah.
All right.
That seems like I said. I figured it would be a deep cut.
That's what I think it is. And people are saying, "Oh, it must be Gandalf because look at the stuff that he's doing, like talking to the, And I'm like,
the bugs, the fireflies.
If it's an Astari, then wouldn't you expect an Astari to behave just like you saw Gandalf behave? Because he was one as well. They basically have the same powers. They would behave in the same way.
That would be like seeing an old grayed out Jedi using Jedi mind trick and be like, it's got to be Obi-Wan Kenobi because he's the only one I've seen do that. But what about all the other Jedi? Nope, only that one.
That. However, it is possible that it could be Gandalf as well. They might go for that. But here's the thing, like, see if they were doing it to have the recognisable name of we've got Gandalf in the show. They can't call him Gandalf.
No.
Gandalf
What's he known of before?
His name much later. So his original name was Elrond. Right? That's his real name. But the elves called him Mithrandria. And it was only the hobbits that called him, and some of the other, if you look back at Lord of the Rings, most of the other people call him Mithrandria. It's only the hobbits that call him Gandalf, so Gandalf wasn't really his name. If you say he had lots of names and no names, if that makes sense, do you know what I mean? So at this point in time, for him to go by the name of Gandalf would be really stupid. So if you're bringing him in to say, oh, we've got Gandalf, but you can't use it, but you say, oh, we've got Mithrandria, that doesn't make much sense to me. Now, the only way, there's nothing in really the history books to say that Gandalf came and helped during the Second Age. What Tolkien did say was of Elrond that he was somebody who visited Middle-earth at times and got to know elves, dwarfs, all the people of Middle-earth, right? But he wasn't in a capacity of being sent on a mission, and he wasn't in a human body at that point. Remember, when they're sent over as Astaris, they're limited. They're put into a human body, which can be killed, and that's so that they don't go power to power against Sauron, because that's dangerous. Right, they're permitted to do that. So they're less powerful than, let's say, Sauron is, because Sauron is not bound by that and not necessarily in a physical body. If Gandalf or Elrond did come and visit Middle-earth at many times, which he probably did, it would have been as a spirit, which means he could have appeared like that and disappeared whenever he wanted, and he could have looked like you, me, or anybody else that he chose to. He could have looked like a brick if he wanted at that point, because they're not physical beings whatsoever. Right. So that doesn't make sense to me unless it's an Astari. And
he appears as a burning bush.
Don't send Gandalf over, I don't think, as an Astari in the Second Age. So to me, they're going to bring in the blue wizards. And I think what he's looking at, constellations, I think that's him trying to find the other one of him, the blue wizard. The only thing that pushes me against this is a couple of reasons. Is why come in a meteor? Why would that happen? That doesn't make much sense to me. The meteor doesn't come from Valinor, because we see the gates open and Galadriel looks back, and then we see the meteor over Middle-earth, right? So where did it come from? It didn't come from Valinor, right? And there's some theories online already that have said if it was Sauron, for example, he may have been using that opportunity to make it look like he was a representative coming from Valinor at that point. But I don't think Sauron would act the way that this character's acting, is not really being fully there, kind of thing. That doesn't make sense to me. The whole Fireflies, people are saying because the Fireflies died after he had, that's showing that he's an evil character. I think that could be misdirection. I think if Sauron's been in the first two episodes, then he's been characters that we didn't, because Sauron can again appear however he wants to look. So Sauron could have been theoretically one of the dwarfs in that room when they're doing the rock challenge, and you wouldn't have known. That's the point. I don't think they have shown us Sauron yet, don't get me wrong. But I don't know. I wouldn't bet on that, but I just don't think the Stranger's Sauron at the moment. I may be wrong, and they're doing something completely different I didn't expect. But, there's no books to go by here, really, other than like what I told you about the various different stories of the Blue Wizards. So that could point to that, but it could be completely different, because, again, you've got to ask yourself the question, why would the Blue Wizard not have come in a boat?
Yeah.
Why, and why not together?
But, like we said, there are things that they're changing around.
There is a really deep
messing
cut
with
that
so
a couple of people have talked about, and it's an old Hobbit story about the man from the moon that came down too soon.
The moon was mentioned on by the Not Hobbitses.
Yeah. Now, the moon in Tolkien's mythology is a Maya, so it's the same class of being. So is the sun, by the way. The same class of being as Sauron, Gandalf, Saruman, all that sort of stuff. But again, not bound to human form. The hobbits have this story where a man fell from the moon and they helped him, and then he went back again, and all that sort of stuff. And it's called Tyrion. And a few people have suggested, what if they're going for some super deep cut where the first kind of Maya to come in in a human body was actually Tyrion, and it was the moon, coming down from. But why? I just think that's maybe just too out there, for people to get on board with. When you could have just used the Blue Wizards if you wanted to go down that route.
And with the whole constellation thing, I think that is more likely, and him looking for the other. That's sure they're playing.
They need to be together for them to make sense. Maybe that's confusing them.
It looks like they might be amalgamating some things and putting a more TV friendly.
We'll be able to know more as the weeks go by and we see more of this character. I think we'll start to be able to say more what we think's going on with them. Yeah. But at the moment, it's kind of still very open, I think.
I do too, man. I'm. It's hard for me to get excited about a lot of shows these days that aren't animated in foreign countries. But this is one that I did. We were like, okay, we'll watch one tonight. Not the night that we're recording this, but on Friday. We were like, we'll watch one Friday night and then the other one Saturday morning. And then I was like, nah, we're watching both. Like, so that's a good sign, man.
Yeah,
right?
That is a good sign.
I'm excited. So I guess we can, any other thoughts on this, or should we start wrapping up an hour and a half in?
Yeah, I think we've this is probably longer than it's going to be each other week, but then we did have two episodes to cover, and it's the first one, and we'll
history,
what we
a lot of
things,
Going forward, I expect this to be fairly 45 minutes, maybe we might need some extra
Depends
time.
What happens in the episode, I guess,
I did not build the full browser screen for you guys yet, so there's no frames here. Manny is still there enjoying his cup of coffee. I'm glad you joined us today, Manny. It was great having you on. You were really quiet though. I hope you talk more next time, Manny. Yeah. But guys, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit this red subscribe button. Oh, my cursor's not on there. That's fine. Hit the red subscribe button you can see on your screen. Really helps us out. We're almost at 500 subscribers. We're hoping we can make 1,000 by the end of the year and start making money, because we're greedy capitalist pigs. No, it takes money to do this stuff. So the website, however, really supports us on this channel and supports everything. So check out lrmonline.com every day for all entertainment news, news, needs, and opinions. Written articles, reviews, celebrity interviews. All the podcasts are even available via the website. So yeah, we also are on all of your favorite podcast apps like Google and Spotify, Apple, and we distribute and are on through Sounder. So yeah, check us out. We got a lot of great shows. Breaking Geek Radio and Daily Cog do a little bit of everything in news and entertainment. Marvel Multiverse Mayhem and the Cantina cover Marvel and Star Wars news and reviews respectively. Anime-versal reviews, and then of course on YouTube we've got the reaction shows, Genre Shot trailer reactions, and AVR Squared, which is anime reactions. A bunch of social media information in front of you guys. We got a Discord if you want to talk to lead Tolkien historian for us, Cam Clark. You can go ahead and find him on Discord.
Don't come on just to test my knowledge and prove you're better, because if you're going to do that, you probably are.
What's that?
If they're coming on to see, if they're better, they probably are.
Probably are. But if you do want to talk to us about thoughts more in depth on this show or anything else in entertainment, please do come over and check us out on our Discord. Anything else you wanted to say, Cam?
Just that I'm doing, if you're into fantasy, we're trying to cover as much, because this is really the golden age of fantasy we're in at the moment, with the TV shows and films. So we're trying to cover all the news for that on Usually that's you, not me. LRMonline.com. And I've got written reviews up for House of the Dragons premiere, for Lord of the Rings. So if you prefer written reviews, I'm covering all these shows as well, and we will be covering Wheel of Time when it comes back for season 2 again. And you can go and find, if you're interested in what Kyle, myself, and Kyle's wife Christine thought of season 1 of the Wheel of Time, please go back and look at those YouTube videos or podcasts as well. It's called The Dragon Reviewed.
Yep. All right, guys. Sorry about this being so late. Hopefully we pick up a good audience, and going forward, we expect to release these Saturday afternoon. So yeah, until then, bye.